great to be here with Temoris Grecko, a good friend, legendary Mexican journalist who has a new book, Killing the Story, just translated into English and really worth picking up about the struggles that journalists in Mexico are facing in terms of violence. I mean, it's been absolutely incredible, tragic. Since 2000, in the time that I've been in Mexico, more than 150 journalists have been murdered, many in horrific circumstances. Very few cases are solved at all satisfactorily. And Temoris, as well as being reporting on this, has been an activist, a defender of journalists. I've known Temoris for about 8 years. I think I met you in 2012. After the death of our mutual friend, Javier Valdez, an incredible journalist in Mexico, Temoris was very much at the forefront of leading efforts there to try and pressure to solve that case and to really create any kind of defenses about this. So getting into this book and about the issues of journalists in Mexico. But first of all, now Temoris is a journalist in Mexico, but also you've been a foreign correspondent traveling the world. I believe you've been in over 100 countries.
94.
94 countries.
Wow. Not 100 yet.
Yeah. Working, covering journalism. And so, you know, you've been in Syria, you've been in, the Middle East, a bunch of countries there.
Africa, Asia.
Asia. Now, when I met you in 2012, had you returned then, or were you still going back and forth at that time?
No, since when I came back here, it was the disappearance of the 43 students in Iguala from Ayotzinapa school. Yeah. And at that time, I wasn't planning to remain here. You know, my goal was just, it was just another visit, but I became involved in the journalistic investigations, you know, with our many colleagues, with you and so many of us, and that kept me here. And while I was going to the state of Guerrero, where all these things took place, I heard of the murder, of the kidnapping in the first place of Moises Sanchez, a very humble, unknown journalist from the state of Veracruz. So it was, and then, we demonstrated when someone is kidnapped, there is hope. There is hope that if you move fast, if you do something, if you push the authorities so that they move fast as well, there is a chance that he will be rescued alive. And so we for a month, we demonstrated, we demanded the authorities to go and figure out what happened. We were totally unsuccessful. Actually, the governor of the state of Veracruz dismissed Moises as a taxi driver. He says, "Oh, he's not a journalist, he's a taxi driver." But then it's like, okay, if he's a taxi driver, then what? It's not important in his life, you know. It's like, you're not going to do anything. Why are you dismissing him this way? And so 4 weeks later, he appeared. He was found. His body was found, dismembered. And when the family was at risk, I went to meet the family, and so I got involved with this issue of the murders of journalists as well. I had been sensibilized towards this before because of previous killings in Mexico, but also because I was in Syria when Jim Foley was kidnapped. I didn't really meet him personally, you know, but we were in the same circles. His friends were my friends, and I also joined the campaign for his release. So
stepping back a second, there's so much crazy stuff to unpack, but like, for having the experience of so many years reporting abroad in all these different countries and seeing armed conflicts, and you first went away when, like in the late 90s, or when did you first leave Mexico and start?
In 2000, yeah.
In the year 2000. Okay, well, the year I arrived. So, did you kind of see a huge change in Mexico? What was it like coming back to Mexico? Did you see Mexico really, because this kind of violence really went up from 2008 onwards, was when you saw the curbs, really rise of murders and stuff. Did you kind of see a country, a kind of crazy country you didn't recognize? Or how did you notice the change in Mexico in that time you were away, 14 years you were away?
Well, in a way, what shocked me was the lack of change. When I left, Mexico had elected a new president from a different party, Vicente Fox. And I didn't really like him, but at least it was the first time in 71 years that someone not belonging to the PRI was going to be a president. And I think that people had hope. And for a few years, we even believed it. Here in Mexico City, the then mayor, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, he launched a lot of initiatives, changing I felt that the atmosphere changed a lot. Like when I started traveling, people would say, "Oh, you are from Mexico City. Oh, I've been to Mexico, but of course, the moment I arrived at the airport, I took another plane to travel elsewhere." And this changed. During this period, people started talking about Mexico City as a place they liked, as a place they enjoyed, and you could see how everything changed. Now the number of foreign visitors, permanent residents, and tourists is high. But on the other hand, we didn't see the political transition coming to a success. Like it was a different party, but at the same time, it was just the elite, the economic elite, using either one set of politicians or the other set of politicians is all the same. And then the PRI came back, the PRI. So when I was here, when I came back here, I felt from one side the disappointment, but then when I started traveling to the state of Guerrero because of the 43 students things, I realized that I was disconnected to my country. That I didn't maybe Guerrero is the most complicated or one of the most complicated parts of the country, but it was like everything was impressive to me, but it was shocking, the level of violence, and even like I could notice that there were like vast tracts of land out of the control of the states. Like the Mexican state surrendered its authority in these areas, and here was the advantage for me, because the fact that my colleagues, my local colleagues, and my Mexican colleagues took this as normal, and to me it wasn't normal. It was like, why are you doing this? I mean, why would the Mexican state surrender its control over this? Like it was a tract of land the size of Haiti. I mean, you could create a republic there. So I started going there, and I could then, like, it was another way to show the connivance, the complicity between the authorities and the criminal gangs who were left to exert their rule over these parts of the land. It wasn't. I mean, the Mexican state had the resources to intervene there. The Mexican army had like important barracks on each of the entrances to this area, but they just wouldn't go there.
Now, so you come back and you're reporting on this kind of crazy situation in Mexico. How would you compare like reporting in Mexico? You just mentioned Syria. I mean, what's it like physically and in terms of the threats and the violence for a journalist in Syria compared to Mexico or in Iraq or in Africa, in these different countries you went to and reported? How would you compare the threats and the problems reporting and just the reality of what you're reporting in terms of the kind of violence and stuff you're seeing?
Well, at some point, Syria became intractable for journalists.
Hmm.
Like all armed groups resorted to fund themselves by kidnapping journalists. So it was, I was one of in the first wave, and then journalists just stopped going there, and international media had to rely on local improvised photographers and informants who were putting their lives at risk, of course, because they weren't trained. And so when I came, I mean, when you are working in Mexico, you think that it's nearly normal. I mean, it seems violent some areas if you go there, but you don't expect them to come after you, and that was one of the big differences. When you are in Syria, when you go to the front line, you know where the front line is. And you know, I mean, you are taking your chances. You know how much you approach the front line, but in this case, you know, Moises Sanchez, he didn't expect anyone to go to his place where he was, to his house, where his grandsons were playing outside. He was sleeping in his room when these 9 or 10 armed guys came to take him out.
So just talking about this case, I think it's a very good case to focus on of Moises Sanchez. And in fact, I was just over there and visiting his son in the community there in Medellin de lo Bravo.
Yeah.
So we've got this guy who's a journalist, community journalist, doing a local newspaper, which is giving out for free in his community. It's a very poor, rural area, kind of mixed, quite populated, but kind of rural area. So talk us through what you're saying, what happened. You've got this guy there, a family guy with doing a local newspaper, and then this armed group comes to the house, and how did that play out?
Yeah, well, that place, you know, this small municipality called Medellin de Bravo is semi-urban. It's like a part of the Veracruz port. Is the greater Veracruz, but then it's like a dormitory city, you know, like it's like people in Medellin de Bravo, they work in the city and then they go back to their communities and sleep there. But it's out of control. I mean, it's a great spot, or maybe a dark spot. Nobody knew what was going there except for Moises, because Moises was this stubborn guy who was publishing his own, literally a newspaper, you know, like it was on letter paper, and he was writing what like the local powers didn't want anyone to know. And also, he used to, when he saw something big, he used to call and warn the journalists from other papers and or TV or radio or even from Mexico City. So he was like the weak link in this network of criminality that had established itself in this municipality. He was the only one who was speaking out, and he needed to be silenced. First, they tried to buy him. They offered him something like maybe $1,500 a month, which for him, it would have been like it would have changed his life, you know. People earn very, very, very little in this area. But he rejected it, and the good thing is that his son is a graphic designer. He wasn't a journalist, but he felt that he had to take his father's teachings, you know. I mean, there was someone there to learn what Moises had to tell about this, and we know his philosophy and his thoughts because of his son, who is now doing Moises' work. And I really love this, you know, because if they thought that they were going to silence the journalists there, what they created is a lot more attention on the municipality, some support for his son to continue his work, and also, I mean, there are people who are now, it's like, for instance, the mayor, the local mayor. He is now, we don't even know if he's alive. He went into hiding, and but he could have like taken us to the governor if the governor was somehow involved. the way to get him was through this mayor. So this mayor is now missing.
So try to get some of this story, because I think for some people outside, this whole thing's so complicated and strange to get a sense of this. So it's this kind of a rural area, you're saying kind of semi-urban area, this guy running a newspaper, this armed group, as it's known in cold terms, an armed group. So a group of, how many guys do you think it was that came to his house?
9 or 10 guys but those were the ones who entered the house.
So 9 or 10 guys with their AK-47s, or they go directly to his house.
Yeah.
Pick him up
in 6 or 7 vehicles, like pickup trucks.
7 vehicles, pickup trucks, with his son there, with his wife there, his family in the house. Take him out of the house, and that's when he disappears. And you say you're campaigning. You're in Mexico and you're campaigning for his release, and then his body is found and dismembered, which is a very kind of cold word. It's cut up and mutilated, which adds this layer of terror. It's not only killed; they want to terrify by mutilating the body. Now, this is one case where there have been arrests, and you're mentioning about they. Who is they in this case? Because you have the mayor, but also organized crime cartel, whatever it is there as well. Who is the they in this case who committed this murder, do you think, and what is their kind of motivations and organization?
Well, in that state, as in many other parts of Mexico, there is hardly a division between political power and criminal power, or private initiative power. It's like, and that's one of the things we are trying to talk about in the book. That when they say the bad guys are the narco traffickers, they are playing down the involvement of so many different actors, people who are actively taking part of organized crime, only that they are the guys who seem or pretend to be good. It's like, who is, there are criminals who don't really pay so much attention to what the press say about them, because they are already the criminals, they are the known guys, and they are surviving this way. But who is more afraid of what the press can say about them? That's the politicians and the entrepreneurs, the business people who are involved in this business. When they feel that they are at risk of being exposed, then they are the ones who act. Let me. Gala. Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. No worries. The dog there is upset about what's happening. So what we're seeing is an alliance between, or even emerging between, certain corrupt politicians and organized crime syndicates, cartels, organizing these areas. So maybe the guys who actually went and kidnapped and murdered Moises were cartel sicarios, but working in alliance with the mayor. That's probably what we think happened. And the mayor, as you mentioned, is then went on the run.
Or the mayor, what the son thinks is that the mayor received an indication, like the governor, because people have told him this, that at some point when the mayor proved unable to silence Moises, the governor told him, it's like, you have to deal with this guy. You have to do something, because he can't be speaking out the way he's been doing it. So
you're referring to Governor Javier Duarte, who's currently in prison in Mexico on different charges,
on corruption charges.
Yeah, on a very crazy case, which is still a very, very messy case.
Yeah.
To try and get out of it. But you think that there was actually a direct involvement from the governor or from the governor's office, from that circle working with the mayor?
Well, the governor didn't have to do the things by himself. He had this minister of the Secretary of Security, Arturo Bermudez, and he was the real nasty guy there. He even personally run a group of at least 15 active duty policemen who were kidnapping and disappearing people for money or for political reasons, or the the political power was in the hands of these criminals.
So we have, and again, Bermudez, who is also been arrested, currently on bail, I believe, pending his case, and that's again messy. So just finishing off with the case of Moises Sanchez, I think, which is a very good case to look at, a very heroic journalist. What's amazing, when I was there with his son, is seeing his son is still in that house, the same house where his father was kidnapped from.
Yeah.
Still running a newspaper, still criticizing politicians. And I see completely vulnerable. I mean, I was like, this is where they came and got you, and you're just, the bravery was mind blowing to me.
Yeah, what's stopping him from doing this again, right? Like to come after you. But I think that all the attention that the case got, there are still proceedings, judicial proceedings. There is one guy in jail, and this guy is probably, maybe an accomplice, but he is not the mastermind of the things, and that's one of the things in Mexico, especially in cases of journalists or human rights defenders. When there is justice, it is when the material killers are prosecuted. But it's the intellectual authors are never investigated. And so who ordered the crime here? Jorge believes it was the governor, Javier Duarte. But then the link to Duarte is missing. This major, Omar, that's his name. So where is he now?
So still another case. So this case, like this case, there's like 150 cases like this. More than 150 cases like this, all of, with these complexities and intricacies of, and it's very frustrating things to get justice, but equally brutal murders. Now, in terms of the big reasons for this, like, do you think, is there one big cause or several big causes? What are the reasons you think Mexico has become so violent for journalists? And it wasn't this violent for journalists in the 1990s, 1980s. Now, there are cases going back, Buendia, going back to the 80s and stuff, but it wasn't like this. So what is it that made Mexico become so perilous for journalists?
I think it's impunity. You can get away with murder, and that's it. No one's going after you. There is our colleague John Gibler says that in Mexico, investigating a murder is more dangerous than committing the murder itself. And that tells you a lot of what happens here. It's like they like now in the case of Javier Valdez. Javier Valdez was a very high profile journalist. He was awarded the International Press Freedom Award by the Committee for the Protection of Journalists in New York in 2011. He was widely renowned there and beloved. He was someone people really liked, and he was murdered as well. And in his case, again, it's like the material criminals, the material killers are being prosecuted. One of them has just been sentenced, but then the other one mysteriously died, and there are like these dark spots of the investigation that is not going after the intellectual authors. At some point we weren't sure if it was the sons of El Chapo Guzman or it was their nemesis, their rival Damaso Lopez. But either way, no one is being prosecuted for that. For intellectual authorship.
Yeah, I think the special prosecutor, they released an indictment of Damaso's son, Minilik, I think, in early this year, but he's still in the United States, and he was a witness in the United States. So you've got a whole crazy cross-border situation there. So we've got the problem of impunity. I mean, this is also the general violence of Mexico. I mean, the general issue of the fact you've got drug cartels carrying out this kind of mass level of murder. You've got politicians working with them. I mean, do we have to solve that problem before we can solve journalists, or which way around do we see that?
Well, I think that we have to solve everything. I mean, it's like you can't pretend to make journalists a privileged group in society. Journalists are doing one important job. They are trying to tell society what the government, what the power is doing behind its back. But at the same time, people are right to feel that we are giving much more importance to journalists. And this is, I don't think this can be solved like in just one part of society. It needs to be solved in the whole. On the other hand, the government could be doing more to help journalists to perform their duty, which is important, which is really important for society. In particular, it's like now we have seen that today, just today, the system of protection, the mechanism for protection of journalists has been defunded because it depended on one of the trusts, right? A fideicomiso.
So I didn't even realize this exactly that. So there will be no mechanism for protection of journalists.
What they are saying is that they will
are still going to be around.
They disappear over 200 trusts, government trusts, and they haven't said anything in particular, for each of the trusts. But the president has just said, like, oh yes, like all the beneficiaries will be getting their money or their support or whatever they used to be getting, but directly with no intermediaries. But how are they going to do it? They don't even know, or they are not saying it. They just say, like, no worries, you will get your support. And we don't really see how that the mechanism had been having trouble to get its funding in the past with the former president and then with the current president. But now nobody knows how the money will go there. And this is for the protection of journalists and for the protection of human rights defenders. Also, on the other hand, you could try to
just to explain if people are unfamiliar. So the mechanism for protection of journalists, the system was created about 8 years ago or so, where journalists who feel under threat can report this, and they get these panic buttons, and they've got a kind of a hotline there. In some cases, they're relocated. In other cases, they've assigned police protection. But some way, and there's like over 300 journalists, I think, inside the mechanism now. It's crazy.
I think it's 800.
800 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the levels. Instead, one thing I forgot to mention right at the beginning, as well as the book, you got the documentary, which is also incredible. We watched that together with some of the families of the victims in 2018, I remember, and that was really emotional. Everyone was crying, and the way that film just hit, showing this number of death after death after death. Now that the book's called, what was the name of how did they translate the film into English?
The Truth Shall Not Be Killed.
The Truth Shall Not Be Killed, okay.
Yeah.
And the book, Killing the Story. Now, has the story been killed in Mexico? What I mean is, what do you think, how would you assess the journalists' work in Mexico in the face of all of this violence? How much is getting reported? How much is not getting reported right now?
Yeah, I think many stories are, people know that they risk their lives if they go after this or that, and many people are afraid of that. Others, they are just taking the risk. The book, and both the movie, the documentary, and the book are not only about deaths and about people being killed. They're also about the people who resist. I'm thinking right now in Adela Navarro from Tijuana in Baja California, who runs this weekly Zeta magazine. And in Zeta, they lost already 3 colleagues, but both predecessors of Adela, both of them were suffered attempts. One of them was killed on the attack. The other one was wounded in the attack, and years later he died because of these wounds, because he was wounded in the lungs, and he died because of this. And also those were the previous directors, and Adela is now the director of Zeta. And also one of her colleagues, Horacio Franco, Horacio Franco is a flautist. No, Horacio Ortiz Franco. Yeah. Horacio was investigating the murder of one of these colleagues, and when he was murdered as well. So she knows that she's sitting in a very, very hot seat, and she has enemies. Every week in Zeta, they run a full page advert with the face of the first director who was killed, El Gato Felix, and he's looking at the camera, and he's talking to the governors, to the current governor. I mean, this happened in 1984, in 1988, and since then, every week they have run this page saying, Governor now Bonilla is the current one. Governor Bonilla, will you be able to deal with Jorge Handron, who murdered me? Will you be able to do it? Because all your predecessors, they weren't able, they didn't dare to touch this guy, Jorge Handron, who was the mayor of Tijuana, who is a politician of the PRI, who has tried to run for governor.
I like when you're putting out there that message they put, and they write it in the voice. So though he Gato Felix is there, they write it in his voice, and also these Twitter accounts that have been started, in the name of Javier or Miroslava Breach, where they still speaking, and I remember one of the murals in Culiacan of Javier, and it says the walls are speaking because citizens have shut up, and it's got him still speaking. So, and that spirit of almost, it kind of reminds me of the kind of idea of kind of Day of the Dead stuff, where people still feel they're communicating with dead people, like journalists, despite being killed, colleagues are still giving them voice and kind of making them speak.
And that's very important. I mean, because the story should not be killed, or the truth, and the ones who can take shares of that, who can help the story or the truth to survive and go out to the public view, is us. Is like, for instance, with Miroslava Breach. Miroslava Breach was murdered when she was researching the links between the politicians in the state of Chihuahua and criminal gangs, and she was murdered. So a group of journalists, local and international, by the way, they got together to keep doing this research, and without names. They are called she was murdered on March 23rd. 23rd, so they are called Collective March 23rd. They don't want to show their faces or their names because they know that they can be murdered. But in doing a collective work supported from abroad, because they can figure out and find those journalists here in Mexico who are following Miroslava's steps, but they can't go to Frankfurt, they can't go to New York to after this journalist. So the international groups gave them coverage, and also echo. They serve as an echo chamber, so that this work could also be published internationally and reach other audiences. This is what we can do. What Jorge, the son of Moises, is doing. They are trying to protect the work, and this is very important because the killers of journalists should know that what they will be doing if they go after a journalist is attract attention on them, and they will attract other journalists who will finish the job of the murdered journalist.
So still keeping that voice alive, which is quite incredible. And a part of that, and what the work you're doing, is saving the kind of reputation of these journalists, and kind of, one of the nice things when, writing stories about these journalists is citing their work, citing the words of Javi Valdez, of Blanco Nelas, and, the amazing quotes you find when you go through their work. And I mean, Javi Valdez, I think, was a real literary figure. I mean, a real big literary figure in Latin America. And that's in spite of when often you see on the other side, these police investigations, they'll often like dirty the name of the journalist. They'll kind of like say, oh, he died because he was involved in something, or often they kind of come up with these stories that don't make sense of the guy had a lover, and they always kind of find, dig up some kind of dirty stuff. You often see that, don't you, in these investigations?
And you'll see, this resort to the lover's argument is especially used against women. It's like for instance, in the case of Regina Martinez, a very important and well-known journalist who was murdered in Jalapa, the capital of Veracruz state, and she was murdered, and they said that she was known because she was kind of sober. Yeah, I don't know how to express this correctly, but she wasn't a person who liked to go out partying. She was kind of, she liked to stay home. Yeah. And also she wasn't known because having boyfriends, but this could be different, and still this would be atrocious how they tried to discredit her. They said that that she fell in love with this guy who was a drug addict, AIDS, a HIV positive guy who didn't have a job, and who was gay. So he went with his friend to Regina's place in the after hours, and they murdered her to steal like nothing, like maybe a camera or something, like the story just doesn't sustain itself. But that's the official version. That's still the official version. So what her colleagues did was to recover her story and tell who Regina really was, because I mean, she was a victim of the murder. She was a victim of the police, saying not providing her with justice, or the judicial system not working. But the police is also staining her reputation, and this is done every time there is a woman involved. They always say, "Oh, she had a lover, and the lover is the cause of this." There are even media that there is this newspaper in the state of Veracruz called El Buen Tono. And every time a woman, a journalist, or maybe just another person, just this young lady who liked to go to the disco, and she disappeared from the discotheque, and they say, oh, she had a narco trafficker lover, and he did this to her. And the implication is that if she was killed because her relationship with the organized crime, then the crime doesn't need to be investigated. Why? We know what happened. We know it. So let's just leave it there.
Yeah, and the worst thing is, even when you hear these stories, and even when they can be disproven, it still sticks in people's minds. They have these ideas. Now, you touched on an issue there with the El Buen Tono, which is quite a difficult issue to write about and to talk about. I even feel bad bringing this up. But the issue of what we call in Mexico El Chayo, and both in terms of governments and drug traffickers giving bribes to certain journalists, particularly traditionally governments. and it's quite sensitive because again, it's like, especially if people have, journalists have been murdered and you don't want to stain their name with an accusation you can't prove. But the reality is there is an issue of certain journalists in these areas being involved, taking bribes, and even I heard from some people sometimes even involved in possibly defaming the colleagues or even kind of setting up colleagues. I mean, how bad is that problem, do you think, and how should we approach that as journalists, talking about this?
Yeah, I think the media system in Mexico is a very good reflection of the corruption of the political system in Mexico. So for too many years, for decades, I mean, independent journalism has always struggled to survive here. Take the case of Proceso magazine. Proceso, which is like the beacon of independent journalism in Mexico, has survived to all sort of advertising boycotts by the government, but also by the organizations of businessmen who don't like this magazine revealing what they are doing, the businesses, the fraudulent businesses they do with the government. And so all the in Proceso has a very important reputation built in its 44 years of history, but it has never been mainstream. I mean, it's a niche magazine because only a certain type of people buy it. People who like to know what's going on, but all the mainstream media have always depended on their deals with the government. You were talking about bribes. These bribes, the bites, the mordidas, are those that are given to individual journalists. But there is something bigger than this, which is public advertising. The massive contracts of public advertising have always been given to those mainstream media who abide to the governmental line. López Obrador, he promised he would end this practice up to a point, I mean, up to a very important point. They've done it, but still you can see that there are some media that are awarded amounts of money in public contracts, in advertising contracts that don't really relate to their influence. It's like you could see how some of them fail from the favor of government, but others, like La Jornada, they are still earning a lot of money because they sustain the official line, the new official line. They did it before. They did like in with previous governments. They always find a way to stick to the official line, and they are rewarded for this. So yeah, that's I think we really need a law that makes transparent and rational the way public money in advertising is awarded to media, and so that there is no confusion here. If you have this amount of subscribers or ratings or whatever, and you are going to our target, then you will be given this official advertising, no matter whether you sustain or not the official line of the government.
Well, that was good. You were talking about solutions, and that's what I wanted to get to next, about how can we make this better. Now, it's very frustrating, and I see this, and I see this in a lot of colleagues as well, and people who've tried to work in like press advocacy here. You try and it just doesn't seem to get better. And so, originally the call was to create the mechanism to protect journalists, and that was created, but still journalists are being killed. Yeah. And then it was like, you have the special prosecutor who's going to try the crime of journalists in this office, and that happened, and still journalists are being killed. So, I mean, how do you see some optimism with this, and what can be done? I mean, because if journalists are out there, as you say, in the field, in Veracruz, in Reynosa, in Apatzingán, Michoacán, in Guerrero, how can they have any kind of protection right now? What could be done to really change this dynamic and not just have another year, another 10 journalists murdered?
Yeah, I imagine that the current government could say, okay, let's draw a line. Let's draw a line. And from here, from when we started to here, there is no impunity. And then go back to previous cases. But at some point say like, we said that we was, I mean, this is in the current speech of the president, that they are going to protect freedom of speech. Okay, let's take it to reality. We are having a lot of controversy with this president because he likes to argue with the mainstream media, and he's like every day there is something that he's saying that someone is replying to him, and there is this cat fight over there. We could live with that. We could live with that if there was no impunity to crimes, to crimes against journalists in the streets or at their homes or wherever. I think that's basic, because if the criminals keep thinking that they are bound to get away with it, that they can kill someone and just go out and get away with it, but then they will do it. There has to be an understanding that this has ended. So I think, yeah, like make it stop now, and then we have to pursue former cases. But a draw has to be, and a line has to be drawn somewhere.
So it's still prosecuting cases is the solution. It has to be government prosecuting. Now, I mean, after the Charlie Hebdo attack in France, there was like 5 million people on the streets of France.
Yeah.
Society, people got up and said, we have to protect journalists. After that, massacre of people in the magazine over those controversial cartoons. And that's, in Mexico, we don't see a societal support.
Yeah.
But also, I remember one time, it's kind of to finish off this conversation now, we know I have to keep on chatting, but I remember chatting to you one time after the murder of Javier, and we were in one of the bars in Roma Norte with a bunch of people gathered, and it was part of getting stuff moving. And I asked you then, if you remember this conversation, but I asked you then, it was a certain group of journalists who were there. So, you see the, certain journalists, see the kind of investigative journalists from a certain perspective are there. And I was like, what about the big name journalists? What about the people who are on the 9 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news, the biggest journalists, where is Carlos Loret de Mola? Where is, all of the biggest names? And you almost looked like I was almost incredulous that they would come. I mean, that these people would give any kind of solidarity. And I remember kind of back and forth, they're kind of co-opted by the system. These are the people who are, got the big money, the big jobs, and they're not going to support the trade. So kind of the last question really to finish this off, and anything else you want to add. Can you ever see a day where in Mexico there could be a real unity, or more of the kind of big names supporting, everyone coming together, or a lot of more journalists coming together and really supporting this, and society really supporting this, the trade, and creating some kind of conditions that would then pressure the government to really act on this?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, but because who are you going to gather with? To join. It's like, for instance, you mentioned Carlos Loret de Mola. He has to go and declare and make a statement, a judicial statement before the judge, because in 2005 he participated in the fabrication of an arrest, like two persons who had been arrested the previous day, falsely arrested. We later knew this. But even if Loret de Mola and his team didn't know that these people were innocent, even if they didn't know, they helped to stage the show in the national, in AAA airtime, to the whole country. And they helped it to destroy the lives of these two persons, and then others who came with them, but they were complicit in this. And now he has to go and tell the judge what he knows about it 15 years later. Is this thing of fabricating crime action for the sakes of getting more rating, but also helping corrupt police to destroy the lives of innocent people, has been common for a long time. This time they were caught in the business, in what they were doing, but then do we really think that people who have done this are going to be honest colleagues in the fight for dignifying their profession? It's like, I mean, they've always been silent regarding freedom of speech and the models of journalists. They are talking now because they don't feel, I mean, they are losing privileges with the new government. So now they are talking, and they have just find out that freedom of speech is at risk when we have been seeing what has been done to our colleagues for so many years. I doubt it. I doubt it. Maybe with some of them, but also their interests are different. I mean, they don't really care for freedom of speech. They care for the business they have always been doing, and so I don't know what to tell you about it. I mean, if we were to help them to wash their faces by joining with us, with the journalists that like those that met that night with you, if they are going to meet with us, to join us and become and wash their faces, I don't think that we should be doing that. But even if we were to, okay, what happens? I mean, do we have to believe them that they are honest if they haven't been honest for so many years? On the other hand, and a third thing, this, I mean, society doesn't come out to protest the killings of journalists because society doesn't believe in journalism. And why Mexican society doesn't believe in journalists? Because they are looking at Loret de Mola, and they are looking at people like him, who have always been close to government and far from society. So at the same time, they are discrediting the profession, and they would probably discredit any fight that we take together. I don't think that we can. We have been arguing about how we have to reclaim the trust of society and its support. But you see that now we're worse than ever, because there is a new politician, a new president who is like widely popular, but he's also discrediting journalists. Not maybe he's targeting Loret de Mola and people like him. But he doesn't say. I mean, sometimes he says names, but basically he saves just a very few from being the bad, ugly press and from launching his followers against us. And so yeah.
No, I mean, I was going to say, we'll just end on a slightly positive note because there's so much. I mean, there's so much sadness in this. When one thing that I think is and to hear last, kind of few words on this to give you a last word, is that despite all of this violence, I mean, I feel privileged. I've been in Mexico 20 years, working here, and I feel privileged to be working among these colleagues. And I think it's been an amazing generation of journalists here in Mexico. I mean, really, including your own work, but people like Javier Valdez, 8 books and amazing literary stuff, the Annabel Hernandez, to Carmen Aristegui, the Rio 12, Seta newspaper, the Gobernador Precioso, Exposure. All of these things have been dug up. I think there's been some incredible work happening as well. So, I mean, there is still some good signs among this misery, yeah?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the other part. It's like if you consider the best work that has been done in this recent, for instance, during Enrique Peña Nieto's government administration. The most interesting and important work done in journalism was done by independent journalists, not by the big media, not by there is no New York Times here to pay for a great investigation. The media who has money to pay for investigative journalism is not interested in that. And those who are interested, well, we need to find out, to figure out how to do it. We gather together, we create collectives, we go to foundations, to get some of their help. We are just all the time trying to devise these ways. But so far it's been successful. I think that the vote of 2018, the people's vote, when they punished the previous president and his party and his allies, and in a massive defeat, was in part motivated because of the information that managed to reach them, even overcoming the blocks. It's like, we don't have TV, but then we have other ways to do it. La estafa maestra, which is like the massive fraud, the killings in Tlatlaya, the killings in Nochixtlan, the disappearance of the 43 missing students, like all these cases were investigated by journalists who at times they challenged the official version, and when they challenged the official version, were smashed by the big media, by the mainstream media. They were defamed, discredited. But at the end of the day, truth prevailed, and that was because of the work of very devoted person, people who really believe in the commitment of journalism to our society.
Well, that's a good place to end. So they haven't succeeded in killing the story completely. There is still a story being told. Great book. I'll put a link to this Killing the Story and to my other work. In the documentary, is that available on any streaming networks?
Well, it shouldn't be, but if you type No Se Mata la Verdad on YouTube, so I don't know why it appears there. It shows up.
Okay, great. Well, great chatting to you, Temoris, and all the best.
Thank you so much. It's been great. Let's have a beer one day after the pandemic.
Have a beer soon and keep up the struggle there.